Well, you've probably wondered by now why you haven't heard any clips of politicians or history from the C-SPAN video library, because once again, we did this last year. We are doing a special behind-the-scenes episode of the C-SPAN podcast, The Weekly, where we go and explore how does the magic happen? How do we get the clips, and how are they made and put into a podcast? This is our end-of-the-year podcast. We'll be back next week with a brand new regular version, but we are joined in the C-SPAN radio studios by three wonderful people. To my left is Shannon Rice. Right in front of me is Caitlin Jacobs, and to my right is Rachel Katz. And the purpose of this episode is to explain to you how Shannon Rice does the magic that puts together many podcasts for C-SPAN. So I'm going to get out of the way and let Rachel Katz.
It does take four of us to figure out how Shannon Rice makes this all work. Yes, my name is Rachel. I'm very excited. I am an avid listener. First-time caller. Actually, I'm not, because
No, you've called before.
I've called before. And I am a big listener of The Weekly and a big fan of both Howard and Shannon and Caitlin. And so to talk to you guys today, let's get into a little bit about how you make the podcast. And why don't you both tell us how you decide on a theme or a topic each week?
Well, I guess then it makes sense for me to go first. By the way, thank you for the question, as they say in Congress. I appreciate the grilling, and I brought my attorney with me to help answer some of your tough questions. Answer the question, yes or no. So The Weekly is a podcast, roughly 15 to 20 minutes every week, where we try to connect video in the robust video library that C-SPAN runs to what's in the news today. Current events, it could be a more of like an event that happens every 4 years, inauguration, but try to connect all that. And the purpose is to demonstrate that a lot of what is said and done in politics today has precedent and has been heard before. And it is geared for the political junkie, for the political historian, for people who have, for me, a lot of what's on C-SPAN in the archives, I lived and I love as a political junkie. And so I remember things, and I just love going through and finding those special moments in the clips and trying to connect it to what's happening. So from my end, I'm part one of the process, finding the clips, writing the script, and we come into we are here in the glass enclosed nerve center of C-SPAN Radio, where the podcasts are taped. But then the person who does the work and the heavy lifting is Shannon Rice. And I want to, before we have Shannon explain what she does, Caitlin Jacobs, running the board for us today, is also part of the team that tapes it. So, Shannon, after we tape it, what do you do?
I hunt down all those amazing clips that you pick out, and I record those into our system so that they're ready to go. And then I drop those into your recorded scripts. And it's always fun to hunt those clips down, because sometimes they're not where they're supposed to be. But also it's a good march back through history to remember. Like we did the broccoli episode a few weeks ago, and I just love President George H.W. Bush's hatred of broccoli is just one of my favorite things, because it's just so ridiculous. And then they did a West Wing episode about it, so I love it. But it just takes a lot of editing and recording and getting all the pieces and parts put together to make the magic happen.
So from the time that Howard sends you an email and says, we're going to do a podcast on Bush not liking broccoli or farewell addresses from members of Congress, how long does it take you from when he decides on the idea? How much time does it take you to sort of go through and have that finished project that is then sent out to everyone?
Gosh, it probably takes me about 7 hours total. It's probably from looking at his original draft, going over what he's given me, reading it, and then we record him. He's the easy part. And then pulling off the clips and then editing it all together and then listening to it about 4 times before I send it off.
I will say it's surprising to hear that Howard was the easy part. So tell me what it's like. What is it like working with Howard Mortman and that brain of his that knows everything and all the hours of C-SPAN's video library?
Oh, it's amazing. I mean, you just feel like you're completely you're in front of greatness, because you cannot understand how someone knows that on March 4th, 1983, this thing happened, and it's It's fantastic.
Well, it's like March 4th, 1983. That was the passage of the Reagan tax cuts, I believe, in Congress, and the Blue Dog Democrats voted for it. By the way, to Shannon's credit, Shannon, you are a history major, right?
No.
I thought you were history.
No, it was journalism.
Journalism.
Yeah.
But I thought...
In political communication for a
You're
master's
taking over
degree.
one of my questions, which was going to be the very Brian Lamb of, now tell us where you grew up and where you went to
Where'd you go to high
school.
school? Actually, before you do that, one thing on your point about how long it takes Shannon to do the clips, I learned recently that you work better. Shorter clips are better for you technically than longer clips. Can explain why that's the case.
Just because we're recording them off of our website, and so the longer the clip, the more room for our computers to make little buzzes and beeps and noises. So the shorter the clip, the easier it is, the faster it is for me to record it and then dump it into the management system we use to edit everything. So it just makes it a little easier.
Okay, go to your Brian Lamb style questions now, Rachel.
Yes, as a C-SPANer for quite some time, I've listened to a lot of Brian Lamb interviews. So take us back a little bit, Shannon. Tell us where you're from, where you went to college, and what you majored in to land you as one of C-SPAN's podcast producers.
I am from Ohio originally. Yes, go Buckeyes. Maybe not this year. But I'm from Ohio originally. I came here for college to go to American University. I did my undergrad in journalism, graduate degree in political communication. I wanted to run Meet the Press. That was my life goal. But I thankfully got a job here and got to listen to the Sunday shows instead. That was one of my first jobs, was cutting them up and listening to them and putting them on Sunday mornings. And I've just kind of risen up the ranks. Podcasts were kind of a no-go when I got here. And we had one podcast that I was responsible for, Washington Today. And so for about 12 years now, that's my favorite of the ones we do. No offense to the Weekly, but that was my baby for a while. So I that's kind of how I've grown and changed here at C-SPAN, is working on that.
And at C-SPAN, nobody has just one job. So what else do you do besides podcasts?
What else do I do? I'm on the radio. I also write scripts and produce other podcasts. Presidential Recordings was one that I worked on last year that was some original material that we used. I also make schedules for our weekend coverage. I attend shoot meetings. I do a lot of editorial stuff. So a little bit of everything here in radio.
And let's take that to Howard, too. So, Howard, your only job is not just hosting one podcast a week at C-SPAN. Why don't you tell everyone your path and sort of what you do at C-SPAN?
Well, my director of communications, so that means we work with our wonderful team back there of Jeremy Art, Sean Duty, and Robin Newton on media outreach and social media. So all of the outward consumer-based, everything that Shannon produces and all the editorial people that they produce and the programming, we want to get in front of the American people. And we do that through the reporters, and we do that through social media. So it's how do we connect from the great content that C-SPAN provides and get into the hands of people who can talk about it and use it. So that's the day-to-day communications work that we do.
So back to the podcast, as you guys are producing this and thinking out and planning out, are you able to plan out months in advance? Are you trying to make that timely? Or are you trying to just make the video library show how vast it is? Sort of what is the goal of the weekly?
Well, I would say a couple things I know ahead of time. Right now, I know what I want to do. I know. So we're taping this mid-December, and this is going to air. This is our last episode of the year. I already know that in January I want to do something involving farewell speeches by presidents, and I want to do something involving inauguration speeches by presidents tied to those events. So I have like a 6 or 7 week runway where I know what's coming up, and I try to plan for that. Thanks to Shannon's flexibility, there are occasions where something big happens, and we bump the schedule down, and I can think of something. For instance, we did a couple weeks ago something involving Matt Gaetz when Matt Gaetz was a nominee for Attorney General, and that was not what I had planned. We had planned for that week, but we went through and found other times that he interrogated Attorney General. Attorney Generals when he was on the Justice Committee. So we put that out fairly fast, moving some other stuff. So it's kind of, I don't know, a 7-8 week, looking ahead kind of thing that we try to do here.
And Shannon, with so many podcasts available, not just from C-SPAN, though we do have quite a few, and everyone should tune in and listen to all of those wherever you get your podcasts.
Indeed.
But what do you think sets C-SPAN's The Weekly apart? Why should people be listening? Why should our listeners who we have who are listening to this one tell their friends that The Weekly is a podcast that is worth 20 minutes of their week?
It is a quick bite of history, and it is perfect, and I've said this since the beginning, for bar trivia. If you really want to get out and wow your friends, you should listen to this podcast and get out there and just know all the answers to that week's trivia bar questions about history, because really that's what Howard's giving you, is the keys to the kingdom. And he's also, showcasing this amazing video library we have that really you can find anything in that you want and wow your friends, wow your coworkers with tidbits from the archives.
Bar trivia. I being Jewish, I remember when I turned 13, I had celebrated my bar trivia. Rachel. Oh, maybe that was a bar mitzvah. I would ask Rachel a question.
Oh, yeah.
Actually, before I ask Rachel a
I was
question,
trying to figure out what happened on March 4th, 1983.
I'll let you search
moment.
that. I'll let you search that. Shannon, tell us. Normally, you are not talking, and I say that because you're behind the boards. What does that mean, and who is behind the board today, taping this right now?
Behind the board today is our amazing PA, Caitlin Jacobs. She is running it, so that means, these boards are kind of scary looking.
Why don't you explain what a board means?
Our recording board, the board is how everything goes through. So all the microphones go through it. All of our routers and feeds go through the board to be routed out to be played. Technically, the board that she's using right now it's a Wheatstone. It's a very nice board. And the thing that is hard about it is getting all the right settings to work the way they're supposed to, but also so that we sound as eloquent as we do right now. She's monitoring our volume and our speech, and she'll let us know if we're peaking or too low or too high, and just making sure we stay on task, letting us know the time of how long we've been going, that sort of thing. Are
we doing okay so far, Caitlin? Thumbs for the audience's sake. Caitlin is signaling yes by using a thumbs up human emoji there.
I love a human emoji. It's the best.
I want to ask Rachel a question.
Okay.
Why talked about how the podcast happened and kind of why, but tell us what you do for C-SPAN, Rachel, and why we have podcasts. What does this mean for the future? And then I have another follow-up for Caitlin and Shannon after that regarding this.
I think C-SPAN has podcasts because we want to be in the places where people are getting news. And so some people are watching television, some people get news from newsletters, some people get news from social media, some people read the newspaper, and some people are listening to podcasts. So to be in all of the places where people are, and there are literally millions and millions of podcasts. So you have to find your audience of people who are looking for, with you, we're looking at, like she said, bar trivia, things from history, things that C-SPAN have covered that you may not know that we've covered, that we still have access to in the archives too. And if you want to find out more from those events, you can go to our website and get more. We also have our book programs on podcasts. We also have Washington Today, which is our sort of like news program in the evening, a wrap up of what happened that day. So there's a lot of different places and spaces where people are getting their news. And so podcasts are one of those that are growing and have been for years. And so we want to be in that space as well so that people can see all the different things that C-SPAN offers.
Everybody here in this room listens to podcasts. How does the technical side, I guess more for Shannon, how does the technical side compare to hundreds of thousands or millions of other? I mean, what I'm getting toward, we're fortunate to be in C-SPAN radio here, where we have great equipment. And would that be the case for others who have their own podcast going, or?
No, I mean, I've looked at, starting my own on my own time, and the equipment can be really, you can get really dirt cheap equipment like microphones and stuff, but it's the quality of how you sound. These microphones are like $500 a piece or something ungodly, and they work fantastic. They sound good as long as we, edit it right. And that's kind of, we're very fortunate that C-SPAN's put some money and interest behind the equipment we have.
And Rachel, do you have any more questions for Shannon? If not, I have a final.
I can do. I mean, for both of you, sort of, what's your favorite part of producing a podcast? Is it figuring out what Howard's going to come up with? Is it the actual editing? Like, do you just love doing the editing for all this stuff? Is it, piecing it together? Is it having the conversation with Howard when you're recording it? And both of you, Howard, what do you guys like about making a podcast? What interests you in this?
Well, I'll go first. For me, it's editing. I always liked editing. When I was in high school, I would make my friends little videos I would videotape us doing stuff and then make them little like movies for GIFs. And so I always enjoyed editing and video and audio and all that kind of stuff. So for me, the real bread and butter of this is editing the podcast together.
For me, I think it's the joy of creating a story where no story existed. We're taping this week. We just put out today on Thursday a podcast about Charlie Palmer, the restaurant just shut down, and all the lobbyists that have been there and all the money spent there and politicians. And being able to do that kind of story and just stringing clips together, for me was incredibly interesting. We are following this up next week, and this will be the week before this is taped. I'm sorry, the week before this appears. George Will and what others have said about George Will, keying off of the Washington Post recently celebrated the 50th anniversary of George Will's first column there. There are, from my perspective, incredible stories to be told in these little alleys, little niches, little slivers of history that are all these disparate pieces that exist in the C-SPAN video library. Pull them together, 5 or 6 clips per episode, and make a story out of them. For me, I get really juiced about that, and I love writing in the morning and finding the clips and writing the script and pulling it all together. So it's incredibly rewarding just to be able to write that out and to share. This is for people who are junkies, for people who love their politics. And again, the C-SPAN style of none of our own opinions, and I love the challenge of being able to narrate between these clips and to write to them so people can just have a deeper understanding that appeals to everybody across the political spectrum.
And I think you didn't ask, but my favorite part, I think, of the podcast, and since I have a microphone, I can share what I think, is that it's not always what you expect, I think, from C-SPAN. Like, certainly you have the farewell speeches from Congress, or when we did stuff about the conventions and when you do things about the debates, but you also have the Thanksgiving turkey pardon, and you have, which we've mentioned multiple times, Bush and broccoli, and you have someone who's using an AI voice as a member of Congress, and just things that you wouldn't necessarily think were going to be on C-SPAN. You did one with Steve Martin, and he's been on Book TV a lot, so his program. So it is C-SPAN, but it's also things that you may not realize are on C-SPAN. You do stuff on members of the Supreme Court. You did stuff about Halloween. You tied it to Halloween. So I just think that there's more. It's not always what you expect in a good way. And I think that people can realize that there is more to C-SPAN than just covering the House and the Senate and the president and covering these events, that there's a lot more to C-SPAN, to what we have that comes out of these events that we do cover, that are funny and interesting and historical. And you are able to bring those into light, because when you see that our video library has hundreds of thousands of hours of content, it can be overwhelming. And so to have someone sort of pick out some of these fun pieces is exciting to listen to.
I would say this, and I know we're wrapping up here. I first of all, I appreciate all that. The broccoli episode, since we started with it first, that was for Thanksgiving, and I'm thrilled that Shannon really enjoyed that. I learned from that. Again, the broccoli episode, the Thanksgiving tie-in, it's a food. We try to do a food-themed episode for Thanksgiving, and it's legendary that George H.W. Bush hated broccoli. What I didn't know going through and searching is how many times he made jokes about it afterwards. For me, that was like the light going off, the eureka moment, where I wasn't I had the concept, but I wasn't stuck with just him. 1 or 2 clips of him talking about broccoli. He kept on talking about it through the presidential campaign. Barbara Bush talked about it. I had no idea going into that happened. So for me, the discovery, the eureka moment of finding these additional moments there that otherwise might be lost, that was the big reward for that, as an example. So, Shannon, I don't know, did we mention how many podcasts you personally handle here at C-SPAN?
Well, we have 15 right now, so we're trying to figure out our future of our 15 total. But we have a couple that are showcasts, a couple that we produce ourselves here in house, and so it's a good smattering of things to listen to.
We suggest that you go to wherever you get your podcasts and listen to any and all of the ones that C-SPAN produces.
Rachel, tell us where to go to find podcasts and give us examples to bring us out.
You can listen to podcasts literally on whatever platform you get them. So Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, our website, C-SPAN Now, our own app. You can listen to podcasts any of those places, and they will all give you the same content.
Great. Well, Shannon, Rachel, and Caitlin, thank you for this special. I hope everybody who's been listening or has the family around and are exchanging presents, and by that I mean exchanging them to the store and getting your money back is what I mean by exchanging presents for the holidays. We'll be back next week with another conventional podcast. We are doing the first one back in 2025. I'm excited about this. Vice presidents who have presided over joint sessions of Congress reading electoral vote results for campaigns they ran in. And, get this, Rachel, they lost.
Has anything interesting ever happened with that before?
Stay tuned for the next episode of C-SPAN's Podcast The Weekly. On behalf of Caitlin and Rachel and Shannon and everybody here at C-SPAN Radio, happy holidays. Happy searching, everybody.